The plasma cannons of the Zephyrian fleet lit up the darkness of space like deadly fireworks. Admiral Kethvar watched from his command ship as the human homeworld burned below them. Earth's blue oceans reflected the orange glow of 1,000 fires, and the once proud cities that had reached toward the stars were now smoking ruins. "Status report," Kethvar commanded, his forearms working the holographic displays that showed the destruction across Earth's continents. "All major military installations destroyed." "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "human fleet remnants scattered. Resistance is minimal and disorganized. The species appears to be on the verge of extinction." Kethvar nodded with satisfaction. The humans had been a growing threat to the Galactic Alliance for decades. Their rapid expansion, their stubborn refusal to submit to proper authority, and their strange ability to adapt and survive had made them dangerous. But now, finally, they were broken. The war had lasted 3 years. The Alliance had expected it to be over in months. Humans were a young species, barely 2 centuries into space travel. Their technology was primitive compared to the advanced civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Yet somehow they had held out far longer than anyone predicted. They fought with a desperation that puzzled the Alliance commanders. Even when outnumbered 10 to 1, human ships would ram into Alliance vessels rather than surrender. Their ground forces would fight to the last soldier, using improvised weapons and guerrilla tactics that frustrated the organized Alliance military machine. But numbers and superior technology eventually won. The human colonies fell one by one. Mars was bombarded into submission. The mining stations in the asteroid belt went silent. The research outposts around Jupiter's moons were captured or destroyed. And finally, the Alliance fleet had reached Earth itself. Captain Sarah Chen floated in her damaged fighter craft, watching helplessly as her homeworld died below. Her squadron of 12 had been reduced to 3 functional ships. Her communications crackled with desperate calls from ground forces, but there was nothing she could do. The Alliance fleet was simply too massive. "All remaining human forces, this is Admiral Kethvar of the Galactic Alliance." The transmission came through on all frequencies. "Your resistance is over. Surrender now and you will be granted the mercy of quick deaths. Continue fighting and we will ensure your suffering lasts for generations." Sarah's hand hovered over her weapon controls. She had maybe 2 plasma missiles left and enough fuel for one last attack run. Around her, she could see the scattered remains of Earth's defense fleet. A few dozen ships at most against thousands of Alliance vessels. "This is Flight Leader Chen to all remaining Earth forces," she transmitted. "We're not going down without a fight. For Earth. For humanity." The response was immediate. Damaged ships powered up their engines. Ground-based missile batteries that had been playing dead suddenly came online. Space stations that had seemed destroyed revealed hidden weapon systems. It wasn't much, but it was everything they had left. The final battle lasted 6 hours. Sarah's fighter was one of the last to fall, spiraling down through Earth's atmosphere in flames. As she ejected, her parachute carrying her toward the burning surface of her homeworld, she saw something that made her smile despite the tears on her face. The Alliance had won, yes, but they had paid a price they hadn't expected. The space around Earth was littered with the wreckage of Alliance ships. Thousands of their soldiers were dead or wounded. What should have been a simple mopping-up operation had turned into a costly battle that had shocked the Alliance leadership. Admiral Kethvar surveyed the damage to his fleet with growing unease. Yes, they had crushed the humans, but at what cost? His superiors back on the Alliance capital world would not be pleased with the casualties. More troubling still were the reports coming in from other sectors. Human ships that had escaped the destruction of their colonies weren't surrendering. Instead, they were disappearing into the vast emptiness between star systems. Intelligence reports suggested they were regrouping somewhere in unexplored space, but no one knew where. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human surface. It's being broadcast on all frequencies." "Put it through," Kethvar ordered. The image that appeared showed a young human woman, her face streaked with dirt and blood, standing in what looked like a bombed-out military bunker. Behind her, other humans worked frantically at damaged equipment. "This is General Maria Santos, commanding what remains of Earth's defense forces," the woman said, her voice steady despite the explosions echoing in the background. "To all humans who can hear this transmission, remember this day. Remember how we fought. Remember that we did not go quietly into the darkness. She paused, looking directly at the camera with eyes that burned with defiance. And to the Galactic Alliance forces listening to this, know that you have made a terrible mistake. You think you have defeated us, but you have only taught us what we're truly capable of. We are humanity, and we do not forgive. We do not forget. And we never, ever give up. The transmission cut out as another explosion rocked the bunker. Admiral Kethvar stared at the empty screen, an uncomfortable feeling growing in his stomach. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen a defeated species speak with such confidence. "Shall we begin the orbital bombardment of the remaining population centers, Admiral?" his tactical officer asked. Kethvar considered the question. Standard Alliance protocol was to eliminate all resistance completely, but something about the human's final message disturbed him. There was no fear in her voice, no desperation. Instead, there had been something that looked almost like anticipation. "Begin the bombardment," he finally ordered, "but maintain a perimeter watch. I want to know the moment any human ship comes within a light year of this system." As the Alliance fleet began its final assault on Earth's remaining cities, none of them noticed the small, damaged human ship that slipped away from the planet's shadow. Inside, a handful of human survivors worked to repair their communications array, preparing to send a very different kind of message to their scattered people. The message would travel to the hidden colonies that the Alliance didn't know existed, to the research stations tucked away in asteroid fields light years from any mapped system, to the generation ships that had been quietly launched decades ago, carrying human settlers to distant stars. The message was simple: Earth has fallen, but humanity survives. Remember what they did to our world. Prepare for the day we return. Admiral Kethvar was right to be uneasy. The Alliance had won a battle, but they had also just created something far more dangerous than they could imagine. They had given humanity a reason to become something new, something harder and more determined than they had ever been before. The humans were defeated, scattered, and seemingly broken. What the Alliance didn't realize was that they had just forged their most dangerous enemy in the fires of desperation and loss. 10 years after the fall of Earth, Commander Marcus Webb floated in the observation deck of New Horizons Station, watching ice miners work in the rings of an unnamed gas giant. The station was hidden in the shadow of the planet's largest moon, invisible to any passing Alliance patrols. It was one of dozens of such hidden refuges scattered across the outer rim of the galaxy. The message from Earth had reached them 3 months after the bombardment stopped. By then, the survivors scattered throughout space had already begun to gather in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Some found each other by accident, their damaged ships limping toward the same unremarkable star systems. Others followed old emergency protocols, heading for predetermined rally points that had been established decades earlier by far-thinking military planners. What they found when they came together surprised everyone, including themselves. They had expected broken remnants, survivors nursing their wounds and planning desperate revenge attacks. Instead, they discovered something much more valuable. They had become something new. Dr. Elena Rodriguez finished reviewing the latest research reports and smiled grimly. The small research facility built into the asteroid they called Haven had produced more technological breakthroughs in the last 5 years than human civilization had achieved in the previous 50. Necessity, it seemed, was indeed the mother of invention. "The new stealth coating is ready for field testing," she told the council meeting that evening. Around the table sat the leaders of humanity's scattered remnant, former military officers, scientists, engineers, and civilians who had somehow made it off Earth or away from the destroyed colonies. "How good is it?" asked Admiral Sarah Chen. The former fighter pilot had been promoted after organizing the evacuation of nearly 10,000 survivors from the burning hulks of Earth's orbital stations. "Our tests show it can make a ship completely invisible to Alliance sensors at ranges beyond 50,000 kilometers," Elena replied. "At closer distances, it creates enough distortion to make targeting nearly impossible." Colonel James Park leaned forward. "What about the new engines?" "Even better news," Elena said, calling up another display. "We've managed to increase efficiency by 300%, while reducing the energy signature by 90%. A ship using our new drive system can outrun anything in the Alliance fleet, while appearing no larger than a piece of space debris on their sensors." The council members exchanged looks. For 10 years, they had been playing a deadly game of hide-and-seek with the Alliance. Whenever their scouts spotted human ships, massive hunter-killer groups would pursue them across multiple star systems. The Alliance had made it clear that they intended to finish what they started at Earth. There's more, Elena continued. We've made contact with 17 different species that have been conquered or suppressed by the Alliance. They're calling themselves the Underground, and they're willing to help us. This was new information, and it changed everything. Admiral Chen spoke for all of them. What kind of help? Intelligence, mainly. Safe passage through certain systems, some technical knowledge, and in a few cases, direct assistance. Elena paused, her expression growing serious. They've been watching what we've accomplished in the last 10 years. They're impressed. Impressed by what? Colonel Park asked. By the fact that we're still alive, for one thing. Most conquered species either submit completely or get wiped out within 5 years. We're still growing stronger. Elena brought up a new display showing population figures. We now have over 2 million people spread across 47 hidden installations. We're not just surviving anymore, we're thriving. The numbers were indeed impressive. Hidden shipyards were producing vessels with capabilities that exceeded anything in the Alliance fleet. Secret research stations were developing, technologies that would have seemed like magic to the scientists on old Earth. Agricultural facilities built inside. Hollowed-out asteroids were feeding populations that grew, larger every year. Most importantly, they were finding new allies. Species that had been conquered by the Alliance decades or centuries ago had been quietly watching humanity's struggle. They had seen something in the human response to defeat that reminded them of their own lost hopes for freedom. Captain Lisa, Zhang commanded one of the new stealth scouts that had made contact with the Calarian Republic, a proud warrior species that had been forced into Alliance membership 50 years earlier. The Calarians had initially been suspicious of the human refugees, but after seeing their hidden installations and new technologies, their attitude had changed completely. The Calarians want to know if our offer is serious, Lisa reported to the Council during her debriefing. They have over 1,000 ships hidden in their outer system facilities, and they're ready to support any major operation against Alliance forces. Similar reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The Synthesis Collective, a group of artificial intelligences that the Alliance had enslaved to run their computer networks, had found ways to secretly help human operations. The Vorthan Federation, conquered 50 years ago, had been quietly stockpiling weapons and ships for decades, waiting for the right moment to strike back. What amazed everyone was how quickly these alliances were forming. Species that had been enemies of each other for centuries were now working together, united by their shared hatred of Alliance oppression and their growing respect for human determination. But the most significant development was happening among humans themselves. The scattered refugees had developed something that had never existed before in human history: perfect unity of purpose. Every decision was made with a single goal in mind: the liberation of Earth and the complete destruction of Alliance power. Michael Torres had been a civilian engineer before the war. Now he led the largest hidden shipyard in known space, a massive facility built inside a wandering asteroid between star systems. The ships being produced there were unlike anything that had existed before the fall of Earth. We're not building warships anymore, he explained to a group of new recruits who had escaped from a recently conquered human colony. We're building weapons of liberation. Every system, every component, every piece of technology is designed with one purpose: to make the Alliance pay for what they did to our world. The new ships were smaller than the old Earth Navy vessels, but incomparably more advanced. They could strike without warning, disappear before retaliation was possible, and coordinate their attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. Most importantly, they carried weapons that could level the playing field against Alliance super dreadnoughts. The Alliance thinks they destroyed us, Michael continued. They think they scattered us to the winds and broke our spirit. They have no idea what they actually did. They took a bunch of individual colonies and planets full of people who argued with each other about everything, and they gave us a common enemy. They turned us into a single weapon pointed at their heart. The truth of this was becoming apparent throughout the galaxy. Alliance patrol ships were disappearing without sending distress calls. Supply convoys were vanishing between star systems. Garrison forces on conquered worlds were finding their equipment sabotaged and their communications compromised. At first, Alliance Command thought they were dealing with scattered pirates or desperate terrorists, It took them months to realize they were facing something much more organized and dangerous. By the time they understood the scope of the threat, it was already too late. The humans weren't just hiding anymore. They were hunting. And every small victory, every successful raid, every rescued group of human survivors made them stronger and more confident. The Alliance had defeated humanity in open battle, but in doing so, they had created something far more dangerous. An enemy that had learned to fight in the shadows, strike without warning, and disappear before retaliation was possible. Admiral Chen stood before the memorial wall in New Horizon Station's main corridor, looking at the holographic images of Earth before its destruction. Billions of faces looked back at her, people who had lived and died on humanity's homeworld. Their sacrifice had given the survivors a purpose that burned brighter with each passing year. "We're coming home," she whispered to the images. "All of us. And when we do, the Alliance is going to learn why you should never corner a human with nothing left to lose." The meeting took place in the hollow core of an ancient comet, light years from any star system that appeared on Alliance charts. Representatives from 23 different species sat around a crystalline table that had been grown rather than built. Its structure adapted to accommodate beings of vastly different physiologies. Ambassador Sarah Chen, the former fighter pilot, who had become humanity's primary diplomat, looked around the table at faces that represented centuries of Alliance oppression. Some were familiar now, like the scaled features of the Calarian war speaker or the shifting energy patterns of the Synthesis Collective's avatar. Others were new allies, species that had only recently made contact with what the galaxy was starting to call the Shadow Coalition. "The hegemony of Tarquan has agreed to provide sanctuary for our refugees," announced Speaker Veltar. His serpentine form coiled around a floating support platform. "We can hide up to 50,000 in our deep space habitats. In exchange, we request technical assistance with our mining operations." Chen nodded. The Tarquan had been among the first species conquered by the Alliance over 2 centuries ago. Their extensive knowledge of asteroid mining and deep space construction had been invaluable to the hidden human colonies. "Agreed," she replied. "We'll provide engineering teams and portable fabrication units within the month." The Vorthan representative, a crystalline being that communicated through harmonic vibrations, chimed in next. "Our intelligence networks have confirmed Alliance fleet movements toward the Kepler sector. They appear to be searching for the source of recent attacks on their supply lines." Everyone around the table knew what that meant. 3 Alliance convoys had disappeared in the last month, their cargo vessels simply vanishing between star systems. No wreckage had been found, no distress signals had been sent. To outside observers, it appeared as if the ships had never existed. "Our stealth raiders are responsible for those losses," Chen confirmed. "We've been targeting their supply chains systematically. Every ton of resources they lose makes them weaker." The Calarian war speaker's mandibles clicked in approval. "Honor through cunning. Your people have learned the value of the unseen strike. Our warriors respect this adaptation." Chen smiled slightly. The Calarians were a proud warrior culture that had initially dismissed humans as weak because of their physical limitations. That opinion had changed dramatically after observing human tactical innovations and their refusal to accept defeat. "We have a larger proposal to present," Chen said, activating a holographic display that showed Alliance territory throughout the galaxy. "For 15 years we've been building our strength in the shadows. Our network now spans over 300 hidden installations. Our fleet has grown to match 1/3 of the Alliance Navy in firepower, and our technology has surpassed theirs in key areas." She paused, looking around the table at faces that showed growing interest. "It's time to move beyond harassment operations. We propose a coordinated campaign to liberate every conquered world in Alliance space." The silence that followed was profound. Some species around the table had been enslaved for centuries. The idea of actual liberation rather than just resistance was almost unthinkable. The avatar of the Synthesis Collective flickered with increased energy patterns. "Your proposal is mathematically intriguing, but the variables suggest enormous risk. Alliance military response would be overwhelming." "Not if we do it correctly," Chen replied, expanding the display to show detailed tactical projections. "We've spent years mapping their response patterns, their logistics networks, their communication delays. The Alliance is powerful, but they're spread thin across thousands of star systems. They depend on their reputation for invincibility to keep conquered populations in line. She highlighted specific systems on the map. What happens when that reputation is shattered? When occupied worlds see their oppressors driven away by a coalition of species they thought were defeated? War speaker Kelthara, the Calarian military commander, leaned forward with obvious interest. You propose to break their psychological hold over their subjects. Clever. But you would need simultaneous victories across multiple sectors to prevent coordinated retaliation. Exactly, Chen agreed. Which is why we need every member of this coalition to commit to coordinated action. Not just the resistance operations we've been conducting, but active military strikes against Alliance strongholds. The discussion that followed lasted for hours. Species that had been hiding in the shadows for decades or centuries debated the wisdom of open warfare. The risks were enormous, but so was the potential reward. The first real chance at galactic freedom in over 300 years. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, participating via encrypted transmission from her mobile research facility, provided crucial technical intelligence. Our analysis of captured Alliance equipment shows significant vulnerabilities in their defensive systems. Their technology has stagnated because they haven't faced a real threat in generations. Our innovations in stealth, energy weapons, and defensive shielding give us decisive advantages in ship-to-ship combat. The Matharian Collective, a hive mind species that communicated through shared thoughts, posed the critical question: what guarantees do you offer that this campaign will not result in the complete genocide of all participating species? Chen's expression grew serious. There are no guarantees in war, but I can promise you this. If we continue hiding, if we continue accepting Alliance domination, there will never be another chance like this one. They're already beginning to suspect the scope of our operations. Eventually, they'll find our hidden bases. They'll track down our ships and they'll finish what they started. She gestured to the holographic display showing the ruins of Earth. My people learned something when our world burned. We learned that sometimes the only choice is between a quick death fighting for freedom and a slow death accepting slavery. We chose to fight. The debate continued for days. Representatives returned to their hidden fleets and concealed populations to discuss the proposal with their leaders. Messages traveled across the galaxy through secret networks that had taken decades to establish. When the votes were finally counted, the result was unanimous. Every species in the Shadow Coalition agreed to participate in what they were calling the Liberation War. Planning began immediately. Human tactical experts worked with Calarian warriors to design assault strategies. Synthesis collective intelligences coordinated with Vorthan seers to predict Alliance response patterns. Tarquin miners provided intelligence on Alliance resource extraction operations that could be disrupted. The scale of coordination required was staggering. Attacks had to be timed precisely across hundreds of star systems. Supply lines had to be established for fleets that would be operating light years from their hidden bases. Communication networks had to be expanded to handle real-time coordination across galactic distances. Most challenging of all was maintaining secrecy while building up forces for the largest military operation in galactic history. Alliance intelligence services were already growing suspicious about the increased activity in the Outer Rim systems. Commander Marcus Webb, now leading the largest human fleet ever assembled since the fall of Earth, reviewed the final battle plans from his flagship's war room. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of over 2,000 ships from a dozen different species, all preparing to strike simultaneously at Alliance targets. 15 years ago, they thought they had destroyed us, he said to his assembled staff officers. They scattered us across the galaxy and assumed we would fade away like all the other conquered species. They were wrong. He activated a display showing the current state of human civilization, hidden colonies that had grown into major population centers, shipyards that could outproduce the Alliance's greatest facilities, research stations that had developed technologies beyond anything the Alliance possessed. We didn't just survive, Webb continued. We evolved. We became something stronger, something more determined, something more united than we had ever been before. And now we're going to show them what happens when you give humanity time to prepare. The final phase of preparation involves something unprecedented. In galactic history, the complete mobilization of every hidden resistance network simultaneously. Sleeper agents on Alliance worlds activated after decades of waiting. Hidden weapon caches were distributed to oppressed populations. Secret communication networks came online across thousands of star systems. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as fleet after fleet of ships emerged from their hiding places throughout the galaxy. Human vessels with their new stealth technology flew alongside Kalarian dreadnoughts and Vorthon crystal ships. The combined fleet represented the dreams of freedom that had been suppressed for centuries. All coalition forces. "This is Admiral Chen," she broadcast on the encrypted network that now linked every ship in the Shadow Coalition. "In 1 hour, we begin the Liberation War. Today, we stop hiding. Today, we stop running. Today, we take back our galaxy." The response came from hundreds of different species in dozens of different languages, but the meaning was universal. It was time for the oppressed to become the liberators. The first blow fell at precisely 0800 Galactic Standard Time, across 47 star systems simultaneously. Alliance patrol ships that had been conducting routine sweeps through empty space suddenly found themselves facing fleets that materialized out of nowhere, their advanced stealth systems dropping like veils being pulled away. Commander Lisa Zhang led the assault on the Nexus Station, a massive Alliance military hub that controlled shipping routes through 6 sectors. Her strike force of 30 ships had been hiding in the electromagnetic shadow of a nearby pulsar for 3 days, waiting for the precise moment to attack. "All units, execute attack pattern Lazarus," she ordered, watching as her mixed fleet of human, Kalarian, and Vorthon ships swept down on the station. Like hungry predators, the Alliance defenders had perhaps 10 seconds to realize they were under attack before the first wave of missiles struck their outer defensive platforms. The new human warheads developed in the hidden research stations cut through Alliance shields like they were made of paper. The Kalarian plasma cannons that followed turned armored hull plating into glowing vapor. Admiral Kethvar, the same Zephyrian commander who had led the destruction of Earth 15 years earlier, was reviewing supply reports when the first emergency signals reached his command ship. At first, he dismissed them as equipment malfunctions or training exercises gone wrong. The idea that someone was launching coordinated attacks across Alliance space was simply impossible. "Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from multiple sectors," his communications officer reported, his voice rising with each new transmission. "Nexus Station is under attack. The Kepler shipyards are reporting enemy contact. Forward base Delta 7 has gone silent." Kethvar stared at the tactical display as red warning lights bloomed across dozens of star systems. This wasn't possible. The Alliance had crushed all major resistance decades ago. The scattered remnants of conquered species lacked the coordination and resources for operations on this scale. "Who is responsible for these attacks?" he demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. The attacking ships are using stealth technology we've never encountered before. They appear and disappear without warning. Tactical analysis suggests at least 12 different ship designs, possibly from multiple species working in coordination." A cold feeling settled in Kethavar's stomach as he began to understand the scope of what was happening. This wasn't a random uprising or a desperate terrorist attack. This was a coordinated military campaign launched by an enemy that had been planning and preparing for years. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Sarah Chen monitored the progress of the initial strikes. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy as coalition forces emerged from hiding to attack Alliance strongholds. The years of planning and preparation were finally being put to the test. "Nexus Station has been neutralized," came the report from Commander Zhang. "All Alliance ships in the system destroyed or disabled. We're beginning liberation of the worker populations." Similar reports arrived from other sectors. The Vorthon crystal ships had shattered the Alliance research facility at Deneb Prime with their harmonic weapons. Kalarian raiders had overwhelmed the garrison. Forces protecting the slave colonies in the outer rim, human stealth bombers had destroyed the massive supply depot that fed Alliance operations in 3 entire sectors. Most importantly, the psychological impact was everything they had hoped for. On worlds that had been under Alliance occupation for generations, the sight of their oppressors' ships burning in space was creating spontaneous uprisings. Populations that had been brutally suppressed were suddenly fighting back with improvised weapons and desperate courage. But Chen knew the easy victories wouldn't last long. The Alliance would recover from their shock and respond with overwhelming force. The next phase of the operation would be far more dangerous. Captain Michael Torres led the strike team that attacked the Alliance Intelligence Center on Sigma Prime. His mission was different from the others. Instead of destroying the facility, his team needed to capture it intact and extract as much intelligence as possible about Alliance military capabilities and strategic planning. The assault went perfectly. His ship's stealth systems allowed them to approach undetected, and the new boarding pods punched through the station's hull like bullets through tissue paper. Alliance security forces found themselves facing human soldiers equipped with powered armor that had been developed in the hidden research station's primary data cores secured, reported his chief intelligence officer. We've got fleet deployment schedules, communication protocols, and strategic assessments for the next 6 months. But the most valuable intelligence was something they hadn't expected to find: detailed Alliance files on the liberation campaign itself. The enemy had been tracking coalition movements for months, building profiles of key leaders and trying to predict their strategies. "Admiral," Torres reported to Chen via encrypted transmission, "they know about us. They've been watching our operations and building countermeasures. This intelligence suggests they've been preparing for a major offensive against our hidden bases." Chen felt a chill as she reviewed the captured data. The Alliance had identified several coalition installations and was preparing to launch preemptive strikes. If the Liberation War had begun even a week later, many of their key facilities would have been destroyed. "It appears we launched this campaign just in time," she transmitted back to Torres. "Continue data extraction and prepare for immediate evacuation. We need every piece of intelligence we can get." The second wave of attacks began 4 hours after the first, targeting Alliance fleet concentrations and military production facilities. This time the defenders were ready and waiting. The element of surprise was gone, and the coalition forces found themselves facing prepared enemies with reinforcements already on the way. The battle for the Helix Nebula shipyards turned into the largest space engagement in over a century. 300 coalition ships faced off against 500 Alliance vessels in a running battle that lasted 8 hours and left the space around the shipyards littered with wreckage. Commander Marcus Webb led the human contingent in that battle, his ships using their superior maneuverability and stealth capabilities to strike at Alliance formations, before fading back into the nebula's electromagnetic interference. But even with their technological advantages, the sheer weight of Alliance numbers was telling. "Fall back to defensive positions," he ordered, as Alliance reinforcements continued to arrive. "We've accomplished the primary objective. The shipyards are destroyed and won't be producing enemy vessels for months." But as his forces retreated, Webb couldn't help but notice something significant. Alliance morale was visibly shaken. Their ships weren't pursuing with the aggressive confidence they had shown in previous conflicts. The crews that had spent decades enforcing Alliance dominance, through intimidation and overwhelming force, were discovering what it felt like to face an enemy that could strike back. Effectively, the third day of the Liberation War brought news that sent shockwaves throughout Alliance space. The planet Kepler 442b, which had been under Alliance occupation for over a century, had declared independence after coalition forces destroyed the orbital garrison. The planetary population had risen up and taken control of all major cities. More significantly, they had done so without significant coalition assistance. The sight of Alliance ships burning in space had inspired the local population to fight for their own freedom. Similar uprisings were beginning on dozens of other occupied worlds. The psychological warfare aspect of our campaign is exceeding all projections. Dr. Elena Rodriguez reported from her analysis of captured Alliance communications. Their own intelligence assessments indicate they're facing what they classify as systemic rebellion risk across their entire territory. Admiral Chen reviewed the intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. The Alliance had built their empire on the assumption that conquered species would remain passive and accepting of their domination. That assumption was now proving to be their greatest weakness. "They're discovering that fear only works as long as the thing you fear seems invincible," she told her staff officers. "Once you prove that the bully can be bloodied, everyone wants to take a swing." But the Alliance response was beginning to organize. Admiral Kethavar had been given emergency powers to coordinate the counteroffensive, and he was marshalling the largest military force in galactic history. Over 2,000 warships were being assembled to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. The coalition had won the opening rounds of the Liberation War, but the real test was yet to come. The Alliance was no longer underestimating their enemy, and the next phase of the conflict would determine whether freedom was truly possible, or if the galaxy would remain under Imperial domination for another 3 centuries, as coalition forces regrouped at their hidden bases to prepare for the Alliance counterattack. One thing had become clear to both sides. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted dramatically. The age of unchallenged Alliance dominance was over, and the outcome of the war would determine whether it would be replaced by freedom or by an even more brutal form of oppression. The Alliance response came like a tsunami of steel and plasma fire. Admiral Kethvar had assembled the largest military force in galactic history. Over 3,000 warships, including 40 super dreadnoughts that had never been deployed together before. His orders were simple and brutal. Find every coalition base, destroy every rebel ship, and eliminate every trace of resistance. The time for measured responses has ended, Kethvar addressed his fleet commanders via holographic conference. These rebels have made the mistake of believing that our previous restraint indicated weakness. They will learn the true meaning of Alliance power. The first target was Haven Station, the asteroid-based research facility that had become the symbol of human ingenuity and determination. Alliance intelligence had finally located it using long-range sensor sweeps and tracking. Analysis of captured rebel communications. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was in her laboratory when the proximity alarms began screaming throughout the station. She looked up from her work on the latest weapon prototypes to see the tactical display showing a massive Alliance fleet approaching their position. All personnel to evacuation stations, the announcement echoed through the corridors. This is not a drill. Alliance forces have found us. The evacuation had been planned and practiced hundreds of times, but nobody had expected to face such an overwhelming force. 300 Alliance ships were bearing down on the station, while the defending coalition fleet numbered less than 50 vessels. Admiral Sarah Chen was 3 hours away with the main battle fleet when the attack began. She watched helplessly as the tactical display showed Alliance forces overwhelming Haven's defenders. The small garrison fleet was fighting bravely, but they were outnumbered 6-1 against some of the most powerful ships in Alliance space. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from Haven Station," her communications officer reported. Dr. Rodriguez's face appeared on the main screen, her laboratory visible in the background as technicians frantically destroyed sensitive research materials. "Admiral, we've initiated Protocol 7. All critical research data has been transmitted to backup facilities. The weapon prototypes have been loaded onto fast courier ships." Chen felt her heart sink. Protocol 7 meant that Haven Station was doomed, but the researchers were ensuring that their work would survive to continue the fight. "Elena, get your people out of there," Chen ordered. "We'll build another research station. We can't replace you and your team." "Most of the staff are already evacuating," Rodriguez replied as explosions rocked the station. "But someone needs to ensure the complete destruction of any remaining classified materials. We can't let the Alliance capture our technology." The transmission cut out as Alliance bombardment began tearing the station apart. Within an hour, the asteroid that had housed humanity's greatest scientific minds was nothing but expanding debris and cooling plasma. But Haven Station wasn't the only target. Alliance task forces were striking at coalition installations across the galaxy, using intelligence gathered from captured bases and interrogated prisoners. The hidden shipyards at Proxima 7 were destroyed. The refugee camps in the Vale Nebula were overrun. The secret supply depot at Ross 248 was bombarded into scrap metal. Commander Marcus Webb led the evacuation of New Horizons Station as Alliance forces closed in on their position. His ships were loaded with civilians, the families of coalition personnel who had been living in the hidden bases for years. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked his tactical officer as they watched Alliance vessels systematically destroying everything they had built. 43 functional warships, sir, plus about 200 civilian transports and cargo vessels. The Alliance forces number over 500 ships. Webb made the hardest decision of his military career. "Signal all warships to form a rear guard. We're going to buy time for the civilians to escape." The running battle that followed lasted 6 hours and cost the coalition half their remaining fleet, but it allowed over 100,000 refugees to escape to deeper hiding places in unexplored space. The psychological impact of the Alliance counteroffensive was devastating. Coalition forces that had been celebrating their initial victories suddenly found themselves scattered and on the run. The hidden network of bases and installations that had taken 15 years to build was being systematically destroyed. On occupied worlds where uprisings had begun, Alliance forces responded with brutal crackdowns. Entire cities were bombarded as examples to other potential rebels. The populations that had dared to hope for freedom were crushed under the weight of imperial retribution. But something unexpected was happening among the coalition leadership. Instead of breaking under the pressure, they were adapting and becoming more determined than ever. The loss of their major bases forced them to become even more mobile and harder to track. "We're back where we started 15 years ago," Admiral Chen told the emergency council meeting held aboard her flagship as they hid in the outer rim of an unexplored system. "Scattered, outnumbered, and hunted. But we're not the same people who fled from the burning Earth." She activated a holographic display showing coalition assets throughout the galaxy. "Yes, we've lost our major installations, but we've also distributed our capabilities across thousands of smaller, more mobile facilities. They can destroy our bases, but they can't destroy our knowledge or our determination." Commander Lisa Zhang, recently promoted after her successful raids on Alliance supply lines, added her analysis. "Alliance forces are having to spread thin to hunt us down. Their massive fleets are powerful, but they're also slow and predictable. We can use that against them." The new strategy that emerged from that meeting was radically different from the conventional warfare approach of the initial liberation campaign. Instead of trying to hold territory or defend fixed installations, coalition forces would become a ghost fleet, appearing and disappearing across the galaxy to strike at Alliance weak points. The first test of this new approach came when coalition intelligence discovered that Admiral Kethvar himself was leading a massive fleet toward the Calarian home system, intending to crush the rebellion at its source. "He's making the same mistake he made at Earth," Chen observed as she studied the intelligence reports. "He thinks overwhelming force is the answer to everything. But this time we're not going to stand and fight where he expects us to." Instead of defending the Calarian home system, coalition forces abandoned it entirely, allowing the massive Alliance fleet to attack empty space. While Kethvar's ships were fighting ghosts in the outer rim, fast coalition strike teams hit the now lightly defended Alliance command centers in 3 different sectors. The raids were devastating. Alliance communication networks were crippled, supply lines were severed, and military production facilities were destroyed. By the time Kethvar realized what was happening, coalition forces had vanished back into the vast emptiness between stars. "They're not fighting like any enemy we've faced before," Kethvar admitted to his staff officers as reports of the raids reached his flagship. "Every time we move to crush them, they slip away and strike somewhere else." More troubling still were the intelligence reports about coalition capabilities. Despite losing their major installations, they continued to field advanced ships with technology that exceeded anything in the Alliance arsenal. Somehow they had managed to distribute their research and manufacturing capabilities in ways that made them nearly impossible to eliminate. The turning point came when coalition forces rescued Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her surviving research team from a prison ship that was transporting them to Alliance interrogation centers. The raid was led by human special forces using powered armor that made them nearly invincible against conventional Alliance security. "They wanted our research data," Rodriguez told Chen during her debriefing aboard the rescue ship. "They were particularly interested in our stealth technology and our new energy weapons. But more than that, they wanted to understand how we've managed to maintain technological development without fixed research facilities." The rescue mission had revealed something significant about Alliance thinking. They still believed that advanced civilization required massive, centralized installations. The idea that distributed networks of small, mobile facilities could be more resilient and adaptive was completely foreign to their imperial mindset. "They're trying to fight us using strategies that worked against previous rebellions," Chen realized. "But we're not like the other species they've conquered. We've learned to thrive in conditions that would cripple conventional military forces." As the coalition regrouped and prepared for the next phase of the conflict, it became clear that the war had evolved into something neither side had anticipated. The Alliance still possessed overwhelming numerical superiority and controlled most of the galaxy's major systems. But the coalition had proven that they could survive anything the Empire could throw at them while continuing to grow stronger and more adaptive. The question now was whether the Alliance could maintain their massive military effort indefinitely while hunting an enemy that refused to stand and fight on conventional terms. The Liberation War had become a test of endurance, innovation, and willpower that would determine the future of galactic civilization. 20 years after the fall of Earth, the largest fleet in human history emerged from jump space at the edge of the Sol system. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at the star that had once warmed her homeworld, now visible only as a distant point of light against the darkness. Long-range sensors confirm Alliance fleet positions, her tactical officer reported. 300 ships in defensive formation around Earth with additional forces stationed throughout the system. Chen nodded grimly. The Alliance had turned Earth into a fortress, determined to deny humanity any chance of reclaiming their birth world. But they had no idea what was coming for them. Behind Chen's flagship stretched a fleet of over 2,000 ships representing dozens of species from across the galaxy. The coalition had grown far beyond its humble beginnings as scattered human refugees. The Liberation War had evolved into a galactic revolution that had inspired oppressed peoples throughout Alliance space. Signal from the Calarian Battle Wing, her communications officer announced. War Speaker Kelthera reports her forces are in position for the flanking maneuver. Vorthon crystal ships are ready to begin harmonic bombardment, came another report. Synthesis. Collective vessels have infiltrated Alliance communication networks and are prepared to cause system-wide disruptions. The fleet arrayed against the Alliance defenders represented 20 years of technological development, tactical innovation, and unbreakable determination. Every ship had been built with one purpose: to break the chains of imperial oppression and restore freedom to the galaxy. But for the humans in the fleet, this battle meant something more. Earth was their home, the world where their species had evolved and dreamed of reaching the stars. The Alliance had turned it into a monument to their own power. But today it would become something else entirely, the place where humanity's legend truly began. Admiral Kethavar received word of the approaching coalition fleet with a mixture of anticipation and dread. For 2 decades, these rebels had humiliated Alliance forces across the galaxy, proving impossible to pin down or defeat decisively. But now they were finally coming to him, bringing their entire strength to attack the most heavily defended system in Alliance space. Analysis indicates approximately 2,000 enemy vessels approaching in standard battle formation, his intelligence officer reported. Fleet composition appears to include ships from every major rebel species. Kethvar studied the tactical displays with growing confidence. Yes, the coalition had proven to be resourceful and dangerous when fighting guerrilla campaigns. But this was different. This was a conventional fleet engagement, the kind of battle where Alliance numerical superiority and firepower could be brought to bear effectively. They're making the same mistake their ancestors made 20 years ago, he told his staff officers. They're trying to fight us on our terms using our tactics. This time there will be no escape. But as the coalition fleet continued its approach, something became clear that shook Alliance confidence. The enemy ships weren't using the hit-and-run tactics that had characterized previous coalition operations. Instead, they were advancing in perfect formation, their movements coordinated with a precision that suggested complete confidence in their abilities. Commander Marcus Webb led the human vanguard as it approached the outer defensive perimeter. His ships had been completely rebuilt using technologies developed during 20 years of hidden research and development. The hulls were constructed from materials that had been theoretical when Earth fell. The weapons were based on principles that Alliance scientists considered impossible. All human vessels, this is Webb, he transmitted on the encrypted channel that linked every ship in the coalition fleet. Today we come home. Today we show the galaxy that humanity cannot be broken, cannot be conquered, cannot be stopped. The response came from thousands of human voices speaking in unison. For Earth, for freedom, for the future. The battle began when coalition advance scouts encountered Alliance patrol ships at the edge of the system. What should have been a brief skirmish between screening forces instead became a revelation that shocked both sides. The coalition ships didn't just defeat the Alliance patrols. They annihilated them. Advanced stealth systems allowed coalition vessels to appear inside Alliance formations without warning. Energy weapons that had been developed in hidden research stations cut through Alliance shields and armor like they were made of paper. Point defense systems that used artificial intelligence to coordinate responses intercepted Alliance missiles with perfect accuracy. Within an hour of first contact, the Alliance had lost 50 ships without inflicting a single casualty on Coalition forces. "This is impossible," Kethvar muttered as he reviewed the battle reports. "Their technology appears to be decades ahead of our most advanced systems. How did refugees hiding in asteroid fields develop capabilities that exceed our best research facilities?" The answer lay in the unique circumstances of humanity's exile. Stripped of the massive industrial infrastructure that had supported their civilization, they had been forced to develop technologies that were more efficient, more compact, and more adaptable than anything that had existed before. Necessity had driven innovation to levels that comfortable imperial scientists could never achieve. But more than that, the Coalition had been fighting for their survival for 20 years. Every system, every weapon, every defensive measure had been tested in actual combat against Alliance forces. They had learned from every defeat, adapted to every Alliance tactic, and evolved beyond anything their enemies could imagine. As the main battle fleets closed with each other, Admiral Chen opened communications on all frequencies, addressing not just Alliance forces but every inhabited world in the galaxy. "People of the galaxy," her voice carried across space to be received by billions of beings throughout Alliance territory. 20 years ago, the Galactic Alliance destroyed my homeworld and scattered my people to the winds. They thought they had ended the threat of human independence and determination. She paused, looking at the tactical display that showed Coalition forces overwhelming Alliance defenders throughout the system. "They were wrong. We did not break. We did not submit. We did not disappear. Instead, we became something stronger, something more united, something more determined than we had ever been before." The main engagement began as Coalition battleships engaged Alliance super dreadnoughts in the space around Earth's moon. What followed was unlike any space battle in galactic history. Coalition ships moved with impossible coordination, their artificial intelligence systems allowing them to function as a single organism. Their weapons struck with devastating accuracy, while their defenses turned aside Alliance attacks that should have been overwhelming. But the true shock came when Alliance commanders realized that Coalition forces weren't just superior in technology and tactics, they were superior in numbers as well. For every Coalition ship that appeared on Alliance sensors, there were 2 more hiding under advanced stealth systems. The fleet that Kethvar thought numbered 2,000 actually contained over 5,000 vessels, many of them using cloaking technology so advanced that they were invisible until they opened fire. "We're outnumbered 3 to 1. Kethvar's tactical officer reported, his voice breaking with stress. "Enemy forces are appearing throughout the system. They've somehow coordinated a simultaneous attack on every Alliance position." The battle for Earth lasted 12 hours and ended with the complete destruction of Alliance forces in the Sol system. But the real victory wasn't military. It was symbolic. As Coalition ships entered Earth's orbit, their sensors revealed something that brought tears to the eyes of every human in the fleet. Earth was still alive. Despite 20 years of Alliance occupation, despite the bombardment that had destroyed its cities, life had returned to humanity's homeworld. Forests were growing in the ruins of great metropolises. The oceans were clean again. The planet that had been wounded was healing itself. "All Coalition forces, this is Admiral Chen," she transmitted as her flagship entered orbit around Earth. "The homeworld is liberated. The tyrants who destroyed our cities and murdered our people have been driven away. Today, humanity comes home." But liberation of Earth was only the beginning. As news of the Coalition victory spread throughout the galaxy, uprisings began on hundreds of Alliance worlds. Species that had been enslaved for centuries rose up against their oppressors, inspired by the example of the humans who had refused to accept defeat. Within 6 months, the Galactic Alliance had collapsed completely. The empire that had dominated the galaxy for over 3 centuries crumbled as its subject peoples claimed their freedom. In its place rose a new confederation based on mutual cooperation, rather than imperial domination. Earth became the symbol of that new age. The planet that had been devastated as an example of Alliance power was rebuilt as a monument to the principle that freedom cannot be destroyed by force. Humans returned to their homeworld, but they were no longer the same species that had left it 2 decades earlier. They had become something that the galaxy had never seen before, a people who had faced the ultimate test of extinction and emerged stronger than the